Well, welcome to the Journey Church that gathers at the Franklin Theater. My name is Jamie. I'm one of the pastors at Journey, and we're thrilled to have you with us. We have been on an epic journey of the last 3 or 4 years looking for a permanent location. And part of what we discovered over the last few years is that we're meant to be a church that meets in multiple locations. This is one of them. But we've realized that we need to have a headquarters. We need a place at least that we have some dirt, we have some land, we have a place we can lead from. And so just kind of accepting that we're not going to be able to serve well without those resources, we've been pressing hard toward some land and a building. And in the last few weeks, if you've been with us, and I recognize probably a number of you are guests with us, so I'll just kind of fill you in. But if you've been with us the last few weeks, we found space a little over a month ago, land at the corner of Moores Lane and Wilson Pike. And finally, I have some pictures for you. So I have some diagrams. So it's a little show and tell today. I get to show you what we've been talking about. In this first diagram, it's an overhead shot, and you'll see dead in the center, it says phase 1 up there. This is the property, by the way. It's from top to bottom, from that green building all the way down here where it says future parking. It's just a long throw of 10 acres. But right in the center is that gray building. That building's actually already there. It's about the size of the same location at Seaboard, which is where we're meeting. It's an old YMCA, Impact Sports. And we're actually on the clock at that location. So we have a lease that's coming up, and we're going to have to move. Well, the good news is this piece of property, 10 acres, already has a building where we could literally kind of take what we do over there, pick it up, and move it to the other location. Now, you'll see here's the phasing. What happens next after that is we build a multi-purpose center. That's that orange building below it. And then the future dream is the fine arts building above it. So let's go to the next slide. This one will give you a little bit clearer picture. All right. So from that gray area to your left that says gathering flex space all the way through the green area, that's the building that's already there. This orange building would be the new building. In the center, there's some walls that are there. We'll have to do some renovation. That would become our collaborative space, coffee shop, kind of a lobby, a place to hang, patios outside, out front. To the left, you'll notice Journey Kids, a place for our kids on the bottom. The top is the gathering flex space. It can be used for children and for youth, but initially it's going to also have to be where we gather on Sundays while we build this building to the right. So we've got adequate land, just not adequate building space. We currently do 4 services on a Sunday morning, and so we need to get out of a space that just seats about 280 to 300 over at Seaboard and create a space that's a little bit bigger. And we can, in the new building, we're going to build something that seats 750, but it's a multi-use building, so we can immediately begin serving the community as well. So that's one of the phases. Then, of course, we have a dream phase over here on the left, the future fine arts gathering space, and our goal there is to create a fine arts space. I mean, kind of the closest thing to a music venue of that kind of a vibe is this space right here, but there's nothing that seats 700, 800 people. So our goal is to build that, not only so that it's a gathering space for our church, but also a venue for other people, and it will have a collaborative space for artists. And one of the things we love doing is partnering with nonprofit organizations. We're talking about building spaces for them as well, looking for other creative ways to serve the community. So that's kind of the dream space. Let me give you a picture of how it would phase out. So you've heard about this in the last few weeks. Phase 1 was we needed $600,000 to secure a mortgage and own the property. We've been gunning hard for this. This all came up rather quickly. We know that if we didn't have that money in time, there's another entity that already wants the property. So our deadline was next Sunday to have $600,000. Phase 2 is $150,000. We need that to renovate the existing building. Now, we haven't talked a lot about the second number because the first number was the most important, but I have an announcement today. As of this moment, based on your giving in the last 5 weeks, we have in hand, in cash, $750,000. We got to build it. We're moving. Yeah. If you've traveled with us at all, you understand this is a really big deal. It's amazing. We have been looking for a very long time, and with a lot of question marks and a lot of ups and downs, a lot of disappointments. So to actually have the money to secure a mortgage and have a place, and not only that, but to have money to immediately go and renovate. We're going to take January, do a bunch of the renovation. We think we might be able to move onto that property first week in February. Is that crazy? And the deadline's next week. So, when do we ever do anything early? This is a miracle. The hand of God has truly displayed itself. So it is worth celebrating, and please carry the celebration on to friends and family, and social media is your celebration of choice, whatever it takes. But we need to celebrate. We're pretty good at lament in our church. We need to celebrate, all right? So this is beautiful. God has provided, and your sacrifice and your generosity in a very short period of time. The offerings that you guys have given over the last 3-4 weeks have just been astounding. And, it's the goodness of God. So we got a place, we got a plan. Now, it doesn't end there. We have to keep giving and keep praying. Here's what the rest of the phases look like, all right? So phase 3 is $2. $2. $2 million, multi-purpose building. We have to add parking in order to do that as well, and there's plenty of room for parking, which, by the way, was one of our challenges. Over the years, part of the challenge was we couldn't find a location where we could have enough parking for a growing church. Plenty, not a problem. So that gives us more parking, gives us the multi-purpose building. Phase 4, we pay off that mortgage. We've never had debt before, so our goal is to get debt-free. We needed to secure the space, so we'll be able to do that this week. But of course, our desire is to pay off the mortgage, and then phase 5, that's kind of our dream phase, to build this fine arts gathering venue. Now, also wedged in there, and it's just really the hand of God, is because we're embracing multiple locations, we're still praying about a Nashville location. So that might be like phase 3.5 or 2.7, or I don't know, but if God provides us a space, we're still looking to have a Nashville presence as well. So be praying for us about how God is going to carry us forward. But there is so much to celebrate. He's so good. Man, we made it. And there's much more. Yeah. We can clap again, because it's just worth clapping about. We should have cookies or something. Do they have the wine out yet? I don't know if, we should be celebrating in a big way. Go home and celebrate, please. God is good. He's been good to us. All right, well, we're in our second week of Advent in a series called Ghosts and Glory. We're considering the story of Jesus alongside the classic tale of Ebenezer Scrooge. And our artists have collaborated to create a little animation piece for us. So let's check this out.
There'll be scary ghost stories and tales of the glories of Christmases long, long ago.
It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave him the appearance of having receded from view and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white, as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same, as if its hold were of uncommon strength. Its legs and feet, most delicately formed, were like those upper members, bare. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound with a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and in singular contradiction of that wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there was sprung a bright clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using, in its duller moments, a great extinguisher for a cap, which it now held under its arm. Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him. He seized the extinguisher cap, and by sudden action pressed it down upon its head.
Based on his writings, we know that Charles Dickens knew the Gospels. However, like a lot of people today, he hesitated to align himself with what you might call the cultural Christianity of his society. Just like so many great stories, A Christmas Carol points us to something greater, to the good news of God's love. And so that was our reason for using this story alongside the story of Jesus as kind of a fresh way to give us perspective on the Christmas story. First, let me ask you a question before we jump in. So I'm going to need you to introduce yourself to a person next to you, and I would like you to answer this question. What transports you into pleasant memories of Christmas faster than anything else? It's kind of the first thing. Like, this happens, and you're like, oh, Christmas. All right, introduce yourself to somebody nearby, and just share that. What transports you into pleasant memories of Christmas? All right, so we'll do a quick quick show of hands. We're going to work our way around the country. How many of you grew up in the Northwest? Raise your hands. And in the Northwest, you experienced some snow, I'm going to assume. How about the Southwest? Anybody grew up in the Southwest? We got a few, well represented. That's good. We had nobody in the last one. All right, Southwest people, did you have snow? Was snow like a thing? No, you had to really work your way to the mountains. How about Midwest? Grew up in the Midwest? You guys have some snow? Anybody? Some? All right. The Southeast? You grew up in the Southeast? Did you see any snow in the Southeast? Occasionally, yeah. How about the Northeast? I know the answer to this question. Snow for me, like, man, the first snow, like, it just, man, it's Christmas, man. The scent of pine for me, and Johnny Mathis singing anything, like, pretty much takes me to Christmas. For some of us, memories of Christmas flood us with warmth and delight. But for others, if we're honest, Christmas memories are sometimes filled with pain. The past is a paradox. It is a juxtaposition of joy and sorrow, happiness and hurt. And I think Dickens captures this beautifully in his description of the spirit of the past. I'm going to pull a couple of lines that you heard in that animation. First, he says this, the past, and I want you to think, he's personifying past. So think about this and how this might relate to your experience. The past is like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man. The past, its hair, it was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle on it. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and in singular contradiction of that wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. Its grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. This is pretty good. Because the past represents early this morning and last week, and for some of us 40 years ago. And so there's this sweeping epic that we refer to as our past. And it is filled with contradictions. Because our stories are marred by injustice, betrayal, disappointments, temptations, misunderstandings, and unmet expectations. If you know the story of A Christmas Carol, you may remember when the spirit of Christmas past takes Scrooge back to his childhood. You see the pain. You see the neglect, the reference to a father who's abusive. You see the loneliness. And yet, you also see kindness. You see in his sister a playful love and a hope. And it's also true of our stories. Our stories are filled with forgiveness and sacrifice, perseverance, learning, generosity, and redemption. You and I are not alone. We share this same past. And the God of glory placed himself in his creation and also experienced the full spectrum of the human condition. Yes, the story of Jesus was filled with the same contradictions as ours. Jesus was adored by his Father. Matthew 3:17 tells us, "And lo, a voice from heaven saying, 'This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased.'" Luke 2:52 says, "Jesus grew in wisdom, in stature, and in favor with God and man." What a pleasant description of his past. And yet in the same book, Luke 2, and the narrative continues through Luke 3, we learn that Jesus was born in the midst of controversy, rumors, and gossip. His mother became pregnant before she was married. The combination of his parents' poverty, government regulations, and the absence of hospitality forced his parents, his mother in particular, to give birth to him in a barnyard. As a toddler, he was seen as a threat, a toddler, but he was seen as a threat to the reigning authority. And he barely survives an assassination attempt. He spent his early years of childhood in Africa as a refugee. And as Isaiah 53, verses 2 through 4 describe him, the servant grew up before God, a scrawny seedling, a scrubby plant in a parched field. There was nothing attractive about him, nothing to cause us to take a second look. He was looked down on and passed over, a man who suffered and who knew pain firsthand. One look at him and people turned away. He was misunderstood often, and eventually he was murdered. We know that one of the reasons Christ came as a child was to experience everything that we do growing up. I want you to think about this for just a second. We talk a lot about Jesus' death and his resurrection, but Jesus also came and lived a life, which means he had a past. Hebrews 4:15 tells us this, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin." Could it be that he came not only to die for us, but to live like us? To have a story. And then to show us how to live in that story. This story filled with joy and sorrow, with favor and misunderstanding. Jesus lived in the tension. He came to earth not just to die, but to live. And his is a story of redemption. And I'm here today to remind you that so is yours. I've said this before, but by way of reminder, God doesn't delete our stories. He redeems them. I sat with a gentleman this week. We had coffee. He's a friend of mine. And he said, "I have spent most of the last few years just existing. And I haven't lived. And I know it. I see it now. Working to pay the bills, keep the family together, struggle through life. But I haven't lived. And what a tragedy to not live. We're not meant to just exist. One of the creeds of the early church says we're meant to come and enjoy God. That part of this journey is actually enjoying life and the life that God has created for us and our relationship with him. And that there's meant to be great joy in this. And yet for some of us, it's difficult to have joy because our past keeps coming up. Yes, there are those pleasant memories, but there are also feelings of shame and regret. And perhaps for some of you, your past feels like it's a story you wish didn't exist. Too much pain. Scrooge felt that way. He kept begging the Spirit, "Please, stop, take me back." And in the narration you heard, he eventually takes this huge kind of nightcap and puts it over the Spirit's head, because apparently light from his head was what was revealing his story, and he didn't want to see his story anymore. He wanted it covered up. What Scrooge eventually comes to realize is that his past matters, and so does yours. So does mine. Your past can be haunted and tragic, or it can shine the light of redemption to the world. Let me say that again. It's for all of us. Our past can be haunted and tragic, or it can shine the light of redemption to the world. There is this juxtaposition of beauty and pain. Now let's go to the very first thing I said to you. What were the pleasant things? What are the things that are nostalgic? C.S. Lewis addresses this. He says this: these things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, are good images of what we really desire. That actually, when you have the nostalgic moments, some of you will sit around Christmas and you'll share a cup of coffee and an apple pie, or you'll tell stories of things past. You'll have maybe you just literally experiencing a tradition together will be nostalgic in and of itself. He says these are good images. And this backward glance is actually a scent of the kingdom when we remember back some of the goodness of God. That's healthy. However, he says, but if they are mistaken for the thing itself, then they turn into dumb idols. See, if we have the other temptation, not to delete the past and hide it in the background, but to live in it, to run to the bar and drink the beer and talk about the glory days, and not live forward, but to get locked up, wish that everything that was still is, then we turn them into idols, breaking the hearts of worshipers, for they are not the thing itself, our memories, that nostalgic feeling. It's not the thing itself. They're only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited. You know what he means by that? It's when you have that nostalgic moment, that for me, the scent of pine, the voice of Johnny Mathis, the new falling snow. There's a moment, isn't there? For whatever it is for you, there's a moment. You connect with something, it's pleasurable, but what happens? It quickly dissipates. You don't get to hold on to it. It's like a scent from a flower. It's like a tune from a song. It's like a country you never visited. There's like this taste of something, but you can't hold on to it. And so the past is important. It's something to acknowledge, but it can't be something that is hidden, deleted, or ignored, and it can't be something that's turned into an idol of something that was glorious and something that you wish was still today. Through the lens of redemption, a backward glance reflects the kingdom of God. This is the healthy way we look at our past. And this is so important that we understand this. And if you don't understand the word redemption, it might be worthwhile, I talk about it a lot here, but it might be worthwhile doing your own little word study and go climb into it, because it is thematic from Genesis through Revelation that God has come to redeem the planet, all of creation, and we're included. And redeeming means this: that thing that broke, or that thing that didn't work, or that thing that wasn't what it was meant to be. He says, I'm going to redeem it, meaning I'm going to make it new. Anything that God has created has worth. And so he says, I'm not going to get rid of that. I'm going to use it. I'm going to take the very thing that Satan meant for evil, and I'm going to make it for good. So that thing that comes up the most is regret. I'm actually going to turn that. I'm going to give you perspective. I'm going to destroy your pride, because you're going to realize, no, I'm not perfect. My sin is really evident. Okay, good. We're going to take that so that you can walk humbly before me. That's him redeeming it. Your temptation to disassociate from the present and go into the past and pretend it was all wonderful and glorious, the other extreme. He goes, no, there's more life to live. I don't want you just to exist. I don't want you to exist in the glory days. There's another person to see, to touch, to look into their eyes, to smile, to hug. There's a person in need that you can serve. There's an opportunity to be generous with your resources, to give forward so that the gospel keeps going, giving hope to another generation of people. When Scrooge takes his trip down memory lane with the Spirit, what comes up for him is neglect, selfishness, heartbreak. And as I said, he begs the Spirit to leave him and extinguish the Spirit's revelatory light. Because it's exposing something, it's reminding him something. And he's ashamed by most of his story. And when you walk into the first scenes of A Christmas Carol, you see a man full of bitterness, someone who has chose to numb out. And I've used this quote before with you. Brene Brown is somebody we love. She's a shame researcher. But she says, you can't selectively numb. If you numb pain, you also numb beauty. When my friend says he's just existing, that's what he's saying. There's so much pain that I just don't want to feel it. But if he doesn't feel that, he also doesn't recognize the goodness. And when you don't recognize goodness and your heart isn't full of gratitude and we don't stop and applaud and celebrate the goodness of God, then we just see the negative. Have you ever had a moment where somebody's looked at your piece of art, or maybe it's even in a performance review, where somebody makes 4 or 5 comments, maybe they're embellished and beautiful, and they're talking about how wonderful the thing is that you created. I love that song, I love that melody, the job you did, the way you crunch those figures, whatever the thing is. And then they come down to that other thing and they go, now, one of the challenges here, or the one thing, if you could just fix this, and what happens? You walk away from the meeting, anybody just ever obsessed on the negative thing? And you missed all the other stuff. There's a tendency in us to do that, to miss out, and to not hold that critique, whether it was unjustly offered or whether it was accurate, and go, all right, that's part of life, and I'm going to move forward because I'm not perfect, and that's okay. But we have a temptation to just numb out, not feel it, run away, hide. Scrooge had numbed his past, allowing it to harden him instead of transform him into a person of mercy and grace. How many of us have done the same? Like we haven't been transformed into a soft, kind child of God, but rather we are hardened and closed off. The Christmas Carol is a great picture of it. If you go, yeah, I'm hardened and closed off, you can look through the narrative of Scripture, you can remember this classic piece of literature, and you kind of see the outcome. What if we really believed that everything belonged? Richard Rohr says this in a book by the same name. He says this: fixing something doesn't usually transform us. We try to change events in order to avoid changing ourselves. Do you have this temptation? If I could just get my calendar a little bit more organized, if I can just make a little bit more money, if I can just confront that other person with the thing they did, if I can just fix this thing, if I can solve this problem, if I can resolve this crisis, then I'll feel better. But he says we're actually failing to do the harder work, which is to allow ourselves to be changed, to allow our sin to be exposed. We must learn to stay with the pain of life without answers, without conclusions, and some days without meaning. I know that right there. Pain of life without answers, without conclusions, and some days without meaning. I've felt that more in the last year than any time in my whole life. Part of it's healthy. So I'm a pastor. I feel a responsibility for a church. A lot of it's unhealthy. Rescuing energy. Trying to be the Savior. Not recognizing that's Jesus' job. Some of you, people may have asked if you've been part of our church for some time, they may have said, what's going on with Journey Church? And you say, I don't know, there's a lot of questions. I say, well, what's your pastor telling you? You might be like, well, I don't know, because I don't know what's going to happen with him either. And that would have been a fair response. Living without answers and conclusions is really hard. And you know what's funny? Like we got to this week and we found out early this past week that the money came in for this. You know, there's this moment like, wait, what? And you know, Kevin and I were talking like, do we send an email? I'm like, no, we got to announce on Sunday. We got to celebrate. This is a really big deal. And there was this moment like, this pervasive peace. And this is where I do believe God has a sense of humor. When this came through and there was kind of a sense that, okay, and please hear me, building and property isn't everything, but certainly what we've recognized in the unsettling element of not having a place to land and serve from, that's left it difficult to serve the community in the way we felt called. Serve you. Then we found out like, okay, this is going to happen. There was just this light peace. I didn't feel like punched in the face by the Spirit, like, hey, idiot, I told you, just trust me. Like, what a waste of 8 months. I had the thing lined up if you just would have been patient. That's not what I sensed. I just sensed this kindness sweep over like, hey, trust. When there are no answers and you don't see any conclusions, and sometimes there's an absence of meaning, what's in your life that is that right now? You want answers, and you don't have them. More and more and more, I'm 46 years old. The longer I live, the more I'm convinced life is much more about the questions than the answers. Because you know what happens in the questions? Your faith is stretched. What happens when you finally get the answer? There's a temptation, right, to be like, well, in the questions we struggle and we recognize there's something outside of ourselves. It pulls us up to see from it through a different lens. Nothing gets wasted that is offered up to God. He uses the struggle. He wants the struggle. So if you're in a place right now where you're like, man, things are broken, I got lots of questions, God's not up there angry, wringing his hands. Not sure what to do with you or your family. He's going, good. Carving some things out in you. Because I love you. And I want you to be wholehearted. And pressing you into holiness. If we don't hope in the kingdom and actively participate in its arrival, and this is one of the missions of our church, to actively participate in the restoration of God's kingdom. This is why we want to serve people in need. It's why we want to love those who feel unloved. It's why we want to find the brokenhearted. If we don't participate, we don't understand the joy and innocence of our past for what it is. Our story matters. It's a prelude to eternity. We're meant to tell our stories. There's something in your story that's going to give someone hope. It's there for a reason. To reflect the light and love of God. You can be haunted by the darkness, or you can follow the star. There is a glory cascading around the sun. If you would but set yourself in his light, your story will never be told again without its place in his story. John 12:46 says, I have come as light into the world so that everyone who believes in me will not remain in darkness. Can each of us live in the tension of our past, that it's meant to be there, and rather than seeing it through regret or something to escape to, could we recognize that it's full of glory when the light of God shines through? And might that be the narrative in our own mind and hearts, so that we don't get locked up in shame, and so that we can give it away. If we can recognize that our story is being redeemed, that we're not alone, that others live like us, that the Son of God came and lived in this tension of favor and misunderstanding, then we'll recognize this Christmas, we have a gift to give away. And you know when I think we recognize it the most? When we recognize the gift that's in front of us. And it's the presence of God. You've heard me at times talk about what it means to be present. Do you know what it means to be present? When I said my friend said he was existing and not living, let me pull that out of the abstract. To live means to be aware of the presence of God. That's what it means to live. So this afternoon, while you're watching football, while you're having a meal with your family, if somewhere this low hum in the background, you're aware of the presence of God, you're living. And you're remaining connected. And by being connected, you will see the world, your past, your present, and your future through the lens of redemption. And if tomorrow, when you get up and you have breakfast, if you're aware of the presence of God, it will affect how you talk, the decisions you make. That's what it means to live. Sometimes we pray and we say, God, would you please come here? God is already here. It's just a willingness for us to enter in. That's my prayer, my hope for me and for you this Christmas season. Would you pray with me? Father, I sense your presence when I walked in this morning. I heard it in the lyrics, in the melody, in the keyboard, in the harp, in the space in this room. You are accessible. You are approachable. Father, I've met a lot of people in my life who haven't seemed approachable. Their insecurity has kept them guarded, or their inflated ego has made them detached. But Father, you are always approachable. Thank you for being that for me. In times when I felt really unsafe and insecure. And Father, I confess that I often just move too fast to live. In my quest to get things done, to achieve, I fail to realize I'm just existing through the day. I don't want to exist, I want to live. I want to be aware and awakened to your presence. Not just in kind of a feeling, but a deeper than a feeling, just a sense, a deep knowing that you're aware of me and I'm aware of you. God, would you empower us, help us to see that our past is a gift. Not one to be relived, not one to be ashamed of, but it's a story worth telling. Because in the redemptive retelling, we display your love. You loved us. And you blessed us with great moments, and you pulled us from the mires of tragic decisions and pain. Thank you for first loving us. Find us as your children, attentive this morning. In Jesus' name.